Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, March 21st, 2022. Getting ahead of myself. I am Dave Biddle flying solo on today's show. We're going to talk some basketball and some Ohio State football on today's show. If you have any questions, you can submit them in the comments section. I'll try and get to as many as I can. Let's start with basketball. Obviously, Ohio State's season ended yesterday in the NCAA Tournament with a 71-61 loss to Villanova. Buckeyes hung in there, got it down to 2 there. I was starting to scream at my TV. I was getting excited there, but Villanova pulled away. Disappointing. At least Ohio State was able to win one game. I know that's not the standard, but I felt like that was very important to at least win a game in this year's tournament. And we'll see. I know a lot of you are wondering, is Chris Holtmann's job on the line? Absolutely not. And I don't think it would have been even if they would have lost to Loyola of Chicago. Gene Smith was going to give him another year regardless, and he's got an excellent recruiting class coming in. Here's the problem as I look at next year, though. While this recruiting class is very good, and we talked about this on Friday's show with J-Book, it's not like elite. It's really good. It's like the 5th best class in the nation, 4th best class right around there. But it's not like the Thad 5. They're not bringing in Greg Oden and Mike Conley and those guys. I mean, this is a really good class, but it's not elite. It's not the type of class where you can just start 5 freshmen and make a Final Four. So there could even be lumps next year. Now, if Malachi Branham comes back, that changes the calculus big time. Malachi Branham comes back to add with this freshman class, with Zed Key then a year older and some of the other guys they have, then they might have something working there. But, man, Malachi Branham's now projected as a first-round pick. If I had to bet, I think he's going to leave, but he's not projected as a lottery pick or anything, so maybe he will stay. And one thing that could help, that I haven't heard anybody really talk about this, but this is one thing where name, image, and likeness could help. Let's say he strikes a nice NIL deal. That could entice him to stay for another year and try and raise his draft stock where he would be the unquestioned the man in the offense next year. He wouldn't be playing second fiddle to E.J. Liddell. E.J. Liddell's definitely gone. I mean, that's no surprise. I know it's not official yet, but E.J. Liddell is going to leave. So, we will see what happens. But I really like this recruiting class. But, man, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be good enough for, if it's just them, to get Ohio State to the second week of the NCAA tournament. And that's what Chris Holtmann needs to start doing. Winning Big Ten championships, regular season championships. I don't really care about Big Ten tournament championships. I mean, it's fun while it's going on, but there's a history of when Ohio State doesn't do well in the Big Ten tournament, they do pretty well in the NCAA tournament, sometimes really well. 1999, they got bounced in the first round of the Big Ten tournament and went on to the Final Four. Yeah, it counts. Yeah, 99 counts. And there's other examples as well. Now, in 2007, they won the Big Ten tournament. The Buckeyes did. But, again, that was an elite team. Conley and Oden and all those guys. And then they went on to the national championship game that year. So there are exceptions to the rule. But usually when Ohio State does well in the Big Ten tournament, like they did last year, when they got all the way to the championship game, lost to Illinois in overtime, they usually don't do well in the NCAA tournament. Last year they got bounced in the first round by Oral Roberts. So we'll see. I know Buckeye fans are disappointed. I'm disappointed. It was year 5. I think the product should have been better by now. But we'll see what happens next year. All right, let's switch some gears and let's talk some football. Buckeyes resuming spring practice tomorrow. They took last week off for spring break. They had 2 practices the previous week, so I got 2 of the 14 practices out of the way, with the 15th practice being the spring game, of course. So they're going to be going full bore for the next 3 weeks. We'll be over there tomorrow, and this is when things will start to get interesting because the first week of spring ball, just 2 practices, not wearing pads. Even Jim Knowles was not implementing his new changes on defense yet. He was asked about, are you doing this and that with, having just 3 down linemen and, 3 linebackers and 5 defensive backs. He said, we haven't even started doing that yet. We're just working on fundamentals. That'll happen when they get back from spring break. So now we're going to start to drill down on things like who's going to be that Leo or that Jack, whatever you want to call it. You guys know what I'm talking about, that hybrid outside linebacker defensive end that is so key to the Jim Knowles defense. I think Cade Stover is the odds-on favorite there. I know I'm not breaking news. He just seems fit for that role. You need to be a guy that can rush the passer. You need to be a guy that's stout enough to stop the run, and you need to be athletic enough to drop into coverage. Cade Stover can do all those things. He's kind of big for the spot right now. I think Knowles usually likes a guy about 245, 250 pounds. Cade's about 255, so he's right around there. He can easily drop 5 pounds if he needs to, but Cade's athletic enough at 255 to play that position. I think another guy maybe to look out for there, a Mitchell Melton. He's been repping at defensive end. He's played linebacker, came in as a linebacker. So that tells me right there he's a hybrid guy. He's bulked up a little bit. I think Mitchell Melton could be another guy that could be looked at in that hybrid role. And we'll see. I mean, there'll be other guys as well. I did think that Court Williams might be a guy that could play that role if they bulked him up a little bit, but it sounds like they love him at that boundary safety spot, that bandit they call it. Jim Knowles could not talk up Court Williams enough. So I look for Court Williams to be that bandit, that strong safety. And he really was talking up Ronnie Hickman as well. I think Ronnie Hickman's going to be that free safety, the regulator back there. And then I think Tanner McAllister will probably be that slot safety. And then Josh Proctor, when he gets back, we'll see where he fits in. Let's see. Speaking of Josh Proctor, right on cue, we've got a question. Should we move on from Josh Proctor at safety is the question from Duncan. I don't think that they should move on from him. He looked good early last year before getting hurt. I know it was all of 2 games. And I know he, was known for, making big hits and missing tackles for that's what he was known for most during his first 3 years. But Proctor's got a lot of talent. The coaches said he was really coming on last year, and I saw it with my own eyes those first couple of games. I think he had turned the corner. I think now with Jim Knowles coming in and teaching that rugby-style tackling, which is wrap and roll instead of you're going for big hits, no head over the bow like it used to be, not trying to knock guys out. Rugby-style tackling is both safer and it's more effective. And I think Josh Proctor is going to be a guy that benefits from that style of tackling where it's coached into him. You're not going for the big hit. The only goal is to bring the guy to the ground, or force a turnover, but you're not trying to knock the guy out. You're just trying to bring him to the ground. We're trying not to miss tackles. And you can't have enough depth. Let's say Proctor isn't a starter. Let's say Court Williams and, Ronnie Hickman are the 2 starters back there. I don't think Proctor's in the mix to be the slot safety. That's Tanner McAllister's job. Lathan Ransom, when he gets back, he might be in that mold as well. But right now, you can't have enough depth. Even if it is Court Williams and Ronnie Hickman, what if one of those guys gets hurt? Would you rather have Josh Proctor back there, or would you rather have Bryson Shaw? I mean, maybe you'd rather have Bryson Shaw. I don't know, or maybe somebody else back there. And yes, I still have a landline. I'm the one person in the world that still has a landline, and it's over there, and I can't get it. If you hear my phone ringing, we are the last people in the world that have a landline. So, yeah, I think you just can't have enough depth. Proctor, if he's not a starter, is one play away from being a starter. You can't have enough depth. So, let's see. We have another question. Duncan says he is really high on. All right, now we're going to wait for the rest of your post there because you left out who you're really high on. We'll see what happens. But I think with Josh Proctor, a 5th-year senior who has a lot of talent, who the one thing that he needs to do is be more of a sure tackler. I think, he could be a guy that really helps. We've seen so many guys over the years, as you guys know, that were disappointments maybe their first 3 years in the program, or maybe if they redshirted 4 years and then the light comes on. I mean, look at Devin Smith, the wide receiver, the season he had as a senior. People were ready to write him off. And Devin Smith became, had the best deep ball threat season in Ohio State history. Steve Miller that same year at defensive end didn't do anything his first 3 years. Came in as a high recruit, didn't do anything, and then stepped up as a senior. I think back to D. Miller, wide receiver, didn't do anything his first 3 years in the program. Redshirted, and then didn't do anything as a redshirt freshman and third-year sophomore, and then became a really, really good starter opposite David Boston his final 2 years. So, Zach Harrison's a guy that might fit in that mold. He's been a disappointment, I think, his first 3 years. He's had flashes. I think this year's a senior, Zach Harrison could be a guy. Maybe doesn't break out. I don't think he's going to be a superstar. But I think he's going to have his best year. And with JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, they got a nice 1-2-3 punch there at defensive end. There you go, Duncan. Duncan says he is high on the corners, but worried about the safeties. Man, I see what you're saying, because last year the safeties were a liability overall. But Jim Knowles loves Court Williams and Ronnie Hickman. I mean, loves them, was gushing about them, and Tanner McAllister, who he knows better than anybody since they were at Oklahoma State together. And he says Tanner McAllister is going to be a guy that's basically an extension of Jim Knowles on the field. One more thing about Josh Proctor that I want to mention. I remember Alex Grinch was just here for 1 year. that 2018 season where the defense was terrible. And I don't know how much of that was on him. That was Greg Schiano was the defensive coordinator that year. I heard it was Schiano that had a lot of the, that obviously had final say, and Grinch wasn't able to do a lot of what he wanted to do. But my point is, at Rose Bowl Media Day that year, very late 2018, I think it was like specifically December 30th of 2018, if I remember correctly. Rose Bowl a couple days later. We're there at the Rose Bowl itself, interviewing these guys. And I pulled Alex Grinch aside and I said, hey, give me the name of a guy who's not really playing much this year on your defense who you think is going to be a future star. And he said Josh Proctor. So, we'll see if that happens, but I think that's interesting. That's a nice little anecdote there that Alex Grinch, when I pulled him aside and asked, give me one guy on your defense that's not playing much that's going to be a future star. Josh Proctor is who he said. Didn't even hesitate. So there you go. Another question here. I like the questions rolling in. David wants to know if I had to make a decision today, who would be the starting tight end? The good news is Ryan Day does occasionally ask me who I think should start at different positions. No, he obviously doesn't do that. Ryan Day is way too smart to do that. Who would I start at tight end? Well, I think it's going to be a combination of Mitch Rossi and G. Scott Jr. I think if G. Scott Jr. can come on and, prove that he can be a good inline blocker, not like that's going to be his forte, that would be huge for Ohio State because he's got the talent, But I think Mitch Rossi is going to have a huge role in this offense as well. Huge role meaning he's going to play a lot of snaps. You guys know what I mean? I thought Mitch Rossi was a really good player last year. He only had like 6 receptions, had a big reception in the Rose Bowl, but he's a good blocker. Former high school running back who was really good out of the Nashville area, fullback type. So he's really a fullback. So I'll give you kind of a hybrid answer there, so to speak. I think it's going to be those guys really splitting the load there. But I'm hoping G. Scott Jr. can add about another 5 pounds. He's right, a little bit above 230 right now, but he's a physical kid, and they don't throw the ball that much to the tight end, but you need to have at least somewhat of a threat out there. So I will see what happens there, but I'm going to go with Mitch Rossi and G. Scott Jr. We'll see what happens with Joe Royer as well. It's another one I'm keeping an eye on. We have another question here. Why say basketball on here when you are talking football? What the H? Well, we already talked basketball. You want to talk some more basketball? Let's talk basketball. It was a disappointing season. It wasn't a train wreck of a season, but my goodness, Ohio State, after that Duke game, beating Duke, expectations were high. I thought this was going to be a Sweet 16 team this year. Maybe it would have been if they had Justice Suing, but it was disappointing. And we'll see what happens with Malachi Branham if he leaves. Even with this recruiting class coming in next year, I don't know. I said this earlier in the show for those that missed it. This is a really good recruiting class, but it's not like Thad 5 level where you can just go in and start freshmen and, go to the national championship game. This is a very good class, but it's not elite. So if Malachi Branham leaves, we'll see what happens. The Big Ten is rough. I think they'll still be a good team next year. I still believe in Chris Holtman. I still believe in him. And I'm not calling for his job at all. And I wouldn't have been even if they would have lost to Loyola. I'm also not one of these guys that says, well, who are you going to get that's any better? Come on. That's if he gets to the point where, he's not winning Big Ten championships ever, never getting to the second round, the second weekend of the tournament, it's going to be time to move on. But I'm not there yet. I am not there yet by any means. So we'll see what happens. But again, spring football begins tomorrow resumes tomorrow. So we're going to be over there and we're going to be interviewing Ryan Day and both coordinators. So that'll be interesting. Keep it locked to Bucknuts for all that. We have a ton of basketball coverage on our site right now, looking ahead to next year, looking back on this year. So you can get on Bucknuts and read all of that. One more question from Duncan. If we had March Madness in 2020, would we think different of Holtman? That was a really good team. See, that's a good point. And I remember going into that because they were peaking at the right time. They would have been a decent seed. They wouldn't have been like a 1 or 2 seed, obviously, but they would have been like a 3 or 4 seed, something like that. And they were peaking at the right time. And I remember, I can't remember if it was like USA Today or somebody did a story. It might have been The Athletic. Somebody broke it down. Their computer, their algorithm had Ohio State winning the national championship that year. And, I don't know. Dayton was the best team in the nation that year. So who knows? But, it is funny thinking back that Ohio State was projected by at least one service to win the national championship that year. So yeah, let's say they would have got to the Sweet 16 that year. Let's say they didn't even make a deep run, but they would have got to the Sweet 16 in year 3 of the Holtman era. That would have a lot of these questions wouldn't be going on right now because we wouldn't obviously be saying things like he can't get to the second weekend of the tournament. And I keep saying it's year 5. I mean, it's really year 4 because that was really wiped off the book. So again, I don't think next year's a make or break year. It's got to be a good year. You can't miss the tournament. It's got to be a good year, but I don't think next year's a make or break year. Now, if Malachi comes back, maybe it will be. We got to get our guy Brian Schottenstein and Cardale and those guys that get him a nice NIL deal so he could stay for another year to pair with his good freshman class they have coming in next year. So we'll see what happens. Hey, I've got to run. I appreciate you guys joining me on this edition of the show. If you missed the show, you can go back and watch the entire thing. I really appreciate you guys joining me. I am Dave Biddle from Bucknuts and 24/7 Sports. If you like the show, subscribe, give us a 5-star review. We appreciate that very much. Tomorrow it'll be Dan Rubin and Dwayne Long on their usual Tuesday broadcast. Thanks again for joining me. I hope everyone has a great